Hello, greetings everyone. And we continue with the Vijñāna-bhairava-tantra video series. We're now on verse 102, and hopefully going forward we will get a bit more regular with the videos. We'll see, but it could happen. And progress through this beautiful text. There's a few dozen more verses on yuktis, or practices, techniques of spiritual awakening and liberation. And then there's a couple dozen verses kind of going deeper into the view as especially articulated in this text. So about 60 verses in total to go. And again, this is verse 102. And I'm speaking to you from one of the rooms in our new Portugal retreat center. And I say our because it does, in fact, belong to the whole community, both literally in terms of investors and donations, and also spiritually in the sense that this is the place for all of you once you're able to travel. And even if you're not able to travel anytime in the near future, from this place we're going to make more and better offerings to the global community who are interested in these non-dual tantric teachings. You can see that's a pretty cool elephant on the wall there behind me, in case you were wondering. Okay. Let's get to the verse. Indrajāla-mayaṃ viśvaṃ vyastaṃ va citra-karmavat bhramad va dhyāyataḥ sarvaṃ paśyataś sukhodgamaḥ. Contemplating the diverse universe as being similar to a magic show or a wondrous painting, or as constantly in flux. Seeing everything in this way, the arising of true happiness occurs. Okay, so this is quite a beautiful verse, and we are in the section on contemplative practices, right? So almost all the verses in this section simply offer a contemplation. And if you say, where's the actual practice? That is the practice. Do this contemplation. Commit to this contemplation. Wrestle with this contemplation. Embrace this contemplation. Explore this contemplation. And it bears fruit. It is a practice in and of itself. And this practice of committed contemplation, or rather seeing reality from a different angle of perception than your habitual one, is a practice much praised by the great tantric master Abhinavagupta, and he calls it vikalpa samskara, the process of refining and purifying your mental constructs, your understanding of the nature of reality with the aid of the scriptures, right? And practice goes by other names as well. And there are other modes of vikalpa samskara too. Anyway, let's talk about the specific contemplation here. So, word by word, dhyāyataḥ, contemplating on or meditating on the vyastaṃ viśvaṃ, the diverse universe, the manifold universe, the projected universe, right? Projected by consciousness within itself. Contemplating the diverse universe as being similar to a magic show, indrajāla-mayaṃ. So let's just take that part. Indrajala means a magic show. It has nothing to do with so-called real magic, siddhis, the magical powers or alleged magical powers of great accomplished yogis that are supposedly literally true, and undoubtedly some of them are. But Indrajala here refers to a sleight of hand magic show, such as many of you have seen wherever, Las Vegas, I don't know, in your local theater or whatever. Now, Indrajala as magic show, it's sleight of hand magic. It's also illusionism, right? So the practice of generating convincing illusions. We should regard this diverse universe as consisting of or similar to a magic show. So what does this actually mean, right? What are we being invited to see? Well, here's one way of looking at it, of understanding this line, that you have a misunderstanding. If you're like 99.99% of all human beings, you have a misunderstanding about what it is that you see, precisely as in a magic show. And you believe you are confronted with a world of external objects, a world that would exist even if there was no observer to observe it, right? So you believe you are confronted by an observer-independent external reality filled with objects, and those objects, mostly tend to fall into two categories from the point of view of the habitual conditioned mind. Things to be desired, things to be pursued, desired, attained, captured, achieved, right? And then things to be feared, things and experiences to be feared, avoided, run away from, or to numb oneself from, right? So this is the world as perceived in terms of external objects, right? So what most people don't perceive is the world as described in this tantric scripture and many others, a play of consciousness. It's said this world in reality is chit shakti vilasa, a play of the power or energy of consciousness. And everything is consciousness, and everything is part of the play of consciousness, where play can be read in that double meaning that the English word has of a kind of sport or game, a game that consciousness is playing with itself, right? Alan Watts called it the game of hide and seek. Consciousness hides itself from itself and then rediscovers itself to its utter delight, right? If you've ever seen a child's face, even with the game of peekaboo, which is literally the most primitive version of hide and seek, peekaboo. Look at the delight on that tiny child's face. That is the delight of consciousness playing this game with itself of hide and seek. But the play of consciousness is also like a theatrical play, sometimes not fun, but rather dramatic or even tragic. But that's also part of the mode in which consciousness explores itself, right? Discovers every aspect of its own being through enacting all these various possibilities, through examining itself from countless points of view, one might say, right? Now, if you go to see a theatrical play, now we have movies, of course, and it's moving, it's a tragedy, but it's a tragedy that's beautiful in its kind of exquisite composition by one of the great tragedians, let's say, right? then you are moved and you shed tears, but you're also not devastated, at least not for more than a few hours if you are, right? You're aesthetically moved by the beauty of this well-constructed artistic tragedy, but you aren't still brooding over it days later. You aren't still worried about the characters you saw on the stage. Well, imagine then that you were able to experience life that way, as worthy of attention, right? If you're an avid theater goer, as I've been in the past, you give your full attention to the play unfolding on the stage. Right? It's not to say that it's dismissible because it's a play. It's worthy of your attention, and it's worthy of your emotional investment, and it's worthy of being experienced in such a way as to give rise to the sense of beauty, the aesthetic sense, right? And yet, at the same time, it's not personal. It's not. It's not the play of consciousness, which constitutes your own life as well, is no more literally true than a great novel or theater play, right? Meaning this to say the story you would tell about your life. If somebody said, "Tell me all about your life and your challenges and your struggles and your suffering and your triumphs," the story that you would tell, while it seems to you to simply be an autobiographical, accurate depiction of the facts, is in fact, right, a story. It's a narrative, and somebody else who experienced those same sequence of events would tell a different story about it, right? So the the fascinating possibility here is to regard the story of your own life, your autobiographical narrative, as no more true than a novel, but also exactly as true as a novel. Meaning to say, a great novel, and of course, many people wouldn't necessarily call their life a great novel, but let's just say that the universe has written a great novel for you in the form of your life, even if you don't see its greatness yet. And if you read a great novel, right, there are lessons contained there. There are insights. An author or a playwright has insights that are worthy of consideration, right? And unveils beauty through his or her characterizations. And in the same way, the drama or story of your life is full of potential insights and full of experiences of beauty, should you choose to extract the potential of those experiences, right? Okay, so I'm going off about this particular teaching rather than the specific terms of or characterization of a magic show, but I'm coming to that because here's the point. It's a magic show precisely because it's a convincing illusion. You think the story of your life is yours, and you think of it as your kind of mental representation of this series of life experiences as being true, and yet it is and it isn't. So what do you see when the illusion is exposed? What do you see when reality is unveiled, and you're no longer tricked by the magician? Right? Of course, don't take that part literally. There's no magician outside of you or other than your own consciousness, because consciousness is the author of the totality of existence. There's no other agency. There's no person, right? There's no divine or supernatural person playing a trick on you. So it's just a metaphor, right? But the point is, when you see through the magician's trick, when you see through the illusion, what do you see? You see a singular universe, as the very name word implies, universe, made of consciousness, right? And consciousness is what are the connotations of that term? It's alive. The universe is alive, and it's patterned. You couldn't have consciousness without pattern, right? Cognition would be utterly nonsensical without pattern. So it's this alive, patterned flow of energy which meaningfully unveils itself to itself. But the meaning that's unveiled is not conceptually capturable. The universe, from a conceptual point of view, is meaningless. It's utterly meaningless. And from a non-conceptual point of view, is utterly meaningful. And that paradox is resolved in direct experience. So, what's unveiled when you see through the illusion is that there is no objective universe confronting you from without. There is no without. It's literally all one consciousness, and you are that. And you are the words fail, but you are the stage. You are the stage and all the actors and the drama and the transcendent realization that it is a drama and the ability to and you're the playwright as well, right? In your true nature, in your real nature. And that's true from every possible point of view, from the point of view of every locus of consciousness. So, you know how when you find out about how a magic trick is done, before you find out, it utterly baffles you. It's just miraculous. You're filled with wonder. How do they do that? Or how did he do that? And you are amazed. And that there's this little part of you that wants to believe that it's real magic. It's not sleight of hand or illusion. But then if you do find out, and oftentimes you can't, but if you do find out, in every case where you find out how the trick is done, then it can't fool you anymore, right? You see it in a different light. And hopefully you can still enjoy it, right? The mastery involved in creating the illusion, you can still enjoy, but it doesn't trick you anymore. And in the same way, when this magic show of an existence is seen for what it is, then there's beauty, there's awe, there's wonder, but there's not the same capacity for suffering because you're not personally invested in it anymore, because the person that you thought you were turns out to be just one of the characters in this staged drama. And you got one of the characters confused with the author, in a sense. So there's this, when you see through the magic trick, there's this, oh, and you can't be fooled again. Okay, so I mean, I could sort of go on about this, but this is just one little part of the verse, and be good to cover the rest of it. Okay, so the verse says, you can also contemplate this diverse universe as something like a wondrous painting. Now, this term citra-karmavat is actually quite vague. Could mean a wondrous or beautiful work, a wondrous painting, a wondrous performance, right? So that brings it a little closer in line with the idea of the magic show. A wondrous performance. So it brings to mind also, the idea of a circus or something like that. But a wondrous performance, right? And this is hinted at, in poetry, in beautiful spiritual poetry. And there's one, I can't remember it exactly. I think it's by Daniel Ladinsky, where he talks about all the. Isn't it amazing to look around and see everybody playing their part so well, so convincingly, that they're totally giving it their all. They're in each role, and there's a wonder in that, right? This is a magnificent performance. This is the most magnificent performance possible. Um, the whole scale of human existence and history and natural phenomena as well, and exploding supernova, and and the list just goes on. What a wondrous performance! What a masterpiece! What a masterwork! Maybe citra-karmavat could be translated that way. Um, but again, there's no separate author. The author is consciousness itself, and insofar as you are conscious, you are that, and so are all conscious beings. But the expression of this great performance, this great work of art, arises directly from consciousness itself. It's not some random concatenation of atoms and so on. And, I have a whole riff about that. That I won't get into, other than to mention briefly that many of you know that this universe that we're in is fine tuned for life, not only for life, but for exactly the sort of universe that we have. For example, if any one of the basic forces, like the strong nuclear force or the weak nuclear force, the basic forces of physics, were different by a tiny, 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 tiny fraction, right? If the ratio of any of these forces were different by even the tiniest fraction imaginable, then stars couldn't have formed. And if stars couldn't have formed, well, no life would exist in the universe. So as this is not some religious statement, right? Physicists say the universe is fine-tuned for life. And some physicists explain it away by saying, well, maybe there's infinite universes, and of course we happen to be in the one that's fine-tuned for life because we're alive. But that, of course, is nothing but speculation. It may be true, but it's still rank speculation, right? And how precisely this universe is fine-tuned for life is utterly mind-boggling. If you look it up, read about it, research about it, it blows your mind. You can't possibly think this is just some random concatenation of atoms. But again, this is not advocating for some creationist view of some puppet master sitting on top, but rather that consciousness emanates a world of experience for itself in pattern, and it is an emanation of consciousness. Not, well, anything else. And the question, even the most kind of unspiritual, one might say, not only atheistic but unspiritual physicalist scientist can't answer is, well, why should there be consciousness at all? Because it's not necessary for anything in the universe to happen the way it does. Consciousness is not necessary, and yet it exists. Seems like a significant fact. But anyway, a wondrous performance, a fantastic work of art. Regard the universe this way. You don't need all my words to convince you of this. I mean, maybe some of you do, but you don't need it, right? Just commit yourself to these practices and contemplations. See the result. What if you regard reality in this way? What is the result of doing so? And do you discover something about the nature of reality which remains true even if you stop entertaining these contemplations, if you stop engaging in these particular thought forms, have they, or do they, point you to an experience of reality which itself is actually can be maintained, not only maintained, can continue independent of the thought forms. Right? Do they lead you somewhere that's real? That's up to you to discover. Third item in this fascinating verse, bhramad, or regard this universe as being ever in flux. Ever in flux. Meaning to say, like this might seem to be just, quite different from the other suggestions in the verse, this third suggestion, but it's not. Because what does it mean to say the universe is always in flux? It means it's not a universe of static objects at all. It might, seem that way from a very myopic perspective. It's not a universe of static objects. It's a universe of endless dancing energy. It's a universe of flux. And that also means impermanence. Flux not only implies sort of a dance of interrelated patterns of energy, but also implies impermanence. There's nothing to hang on to, literally. Because everything keeps changing constantly. And it might appear from the object perspective, seeing a world full of objects, that objects die, decay, or fade away. But when you see truly and accurately, it's nothing but transformations of energy, endless transformations of energy. But still, nothing to hang on to. Nothing dies, nothing is destroyed, but there's nothing to hang on to at the same time. There's, in fact, great benefit to doing ultimately the only thing you can really do, which is surrender to the fluxing flow of the pattern. And, if spiritual awakening doesn't happen or doesn't really complete itself, then you still are a part of the fluxing flow of the infinite pattern. And if spiritual awakening really sort of takes root, then you get to see that you are the whole, you are the pattern. You are the pattern and its author simultaneously. But obviously not the you that you think of yourself as, right? You think the you named so-and-so is the author of the pattern, that's just, megalomania. Rather, the you that you think of yourself as is part of the performance. Again, it's part of the manifestation of the one that is the real you. Okay, so seeing everything in this way, sarvaṃ paśyataś, seeing everything in this way, there is the arising of true happiness, sukhodgamaḥ. True joy. Not so different from the joy of getting what you want within the matrix. It's the joy of transcending the matrix. Okay, so as has happened before, the Facebook software here isn't showing me any of your comments. I'm sure there are some, but I can't answer them because it doesn't show them. And in the not too distant future, I will stop using Facebook Live software at all. So, but for now, it's happening. Let's end with another recitation of the verse. Indrajāla-mayaṃ viśvaṃ, vyastaṃ va citra-karmavat, bhramad dhyāyataḥ sarvaṃ paśyataś sukhodgamaḥ. Om. Enjoy the contemplation. May it become realization.